was 1 a.m. and I was walking back to my apartment through the empty streets of Madrid. And this was after a night out. My feet hurt, but my mind was racing even faster than the Spanish conversations I'd been trying to keep up with all night. I was replaying a certain conversation that I'd had with a Spaniard about work life balance and how I had defended the American hustle. The idea that success requires a lot of sacrifice. I thought, I mean, this is just how it is, right? As I was walking and replaying the conversation, a sinking feeling grew in my stomach. What if the only reason I thought that was simply because I'm American? What if I only value productivity and hustle because I was manufactured in a country that worships those things? What if I only love coffee so much because my mom made me a cappuccino every morning before school? What if I only think directness is better than subtlety because that's what my culture programmed into me? What if I only think it is normal to ignore people when you are mad at them because that's all I saw growing up? It was like suddenly seeing the matrix code behind everything I thought was just being me. Perhaps if I had been born in Spain instead of the US, would I naturally value long lunches and cigarette breaks over grinding until burnout? Would I think it's bizarre to eat dinner at 6 p.m. instead of at 10 p.m.? Would my entire worldview, everything I consider normal or right, be completely flipped? Well, welcome back to Get In, You Are Driving, where we remind ourselves that life is tough, but we are tougher. And most importantly, that you are the one in the driver's seat. Or at least you should be. And if you're not, you better get back in there. But first, you need to figure out who's actually been driving all this time. Today, we're diving into pre-installed settings you were born with, the invisible programming that shapes how you see the world, make decisions, and navigate life's roadmap. I'm going to share how my time in Spain has totally scrambled my default settings and why that uncomfortable scrambling might be exactly what we all need. Because once you recognize which parts of you were simply installed at the factory, you can finally decide which parts of yourself you might want to keep, which ones you may want to modify, and which ones you're ready to completely override. So buckle up because it's time to pop our hood on your mental engine and see what's really been driving you. I want to start out with really talking about recognizing our default settings. Now, by default settings, you're going to see that the title of this is manufactured in the USA but reprogrammed in Spain. So, of course, like I was born in the US, I lived there until I was 21 years old, and for the last 3 years, I have been living in Spain and just gallivanting around Europe. So, again, your default settings are your culture, your religion, your ethnicity, your family, where you're born, right? Like all those things. And I want to share something that really hit home for me, and I really liked the way it was worded. I was actually listening to the Call Her Daddy podcast. And yes, I know what you might be thinking. That might not line up with me. But sometimes she has some interesting guests on there and they say things, and I'm a curious girly. So, yeah. And also, I like listening to people that I might perceive as super different than me. But at the end of the day, I feel that I do always learn something. Now, she had Penn Badgley on there. Bagley. Oh my gosh, I don't know how to say his name. Penn Bagley, whatever. AKA Damn Humphrey, Lonely Boy. If you know, you know. But yeah, he was being interviewed and he said something that it was very, very, very good, very worth sharing. So here it is. He said, "We are dealing with lots of ways of thinking that are not our ways. And some of these ways of thinking are putting a lot of pressure on us to conform." Guys, this is really good. This idea really stuck with me for like a few days because right now, I'm actually not in Spain. I'm somewhere else, but I've obviously been in Spain for the last minute, and I have had to have throughout being in Europe. So I've had so many different conversations with different people from different countries and people that genuinely think so differently than I do. So differently than I do. And honestly, a part of that has been absolutely fascinating because it's cool to learn about something that's so different, right? It opens your mind up. But also, it's kind of destabilizing at the same time. So, I started noticing this trend that everything I was saying in conversations just went back to my American roots. And that everything they were saying in their conversations were ideas from where they come from. And to an extent, this is normal, right? Like, this is normal. Of course, we're going to think from the place that we got our ideas from. So, what I would do is I would replay these conversations in my head and again think, well, of course I'm American. Like, this is why I think this way, right? Of course I believe this because I grew up in that kind of household. And when I kept having these thoughts of like, well, of course I believe this because X, of course I believe this because Y, suddenly I kind of felt like I saw all these invisible strings that were pulling on my thoughts and opinions. And at least for me, these were strings that I just never really knew were there. I never really thought about it. And for someone who does pride myself on forming my own opinions and seeing life through my own lens, this was very upsetting. Like, I really can't tell you how upsetting this was because I felt like maybe I had absolutely no real opinions that were just mine. And think about this for just a second. Like, let's think about this. How many of your beliefs, preferences, habits, even your instinctive reactions to things come pre installed? Come pre installed. Like a car that rolls off the assembly line with certain features already built in. Built in. Like, friends, this is how I was feeling. And again, these default settings come from your nationality and culture, your family dynamics, the education system you grew up in, the friends you surrounded yourself with, the media you've consumed, even the era you were born in. We all have this and we can't help where we come from, right? But I think none of us asked for these specific settings. We were just given them. We didn't get to choose where we were manufactured. And yet, these settings, whether we realize it consciously or not, are running in the background of our minds every single day, influencing decisions we make. And the wild part is, I think that most of us never question them. We just assume, well, this is who I am. And I remember when I was younger, I thought certain foods from other cultures were just so weird. And I always remember thinking, like, ew, how could anyone eat that? And I used to think that a lot. So, but now getting older, realizing, like, if I were born in that country with that family, eating that food would be totally normal. Like, I wouldn't even question it, right? So, what else might feel completely normal to me if I had been built in a different factory? And here's, I think, where it gets interesting. Once you start noticing these default settings within yourself, you begin to see how they're really operating all around you. You start to notice how everyone, no matter where they come from, tends to think that their way is probably the better way or the more superior way. And I think when we meet people who don't think like us, the first instinct is to label them as weird or annoying. But I think that this is all just when we do this in our heads, and let's say we label someone as weird, I think what that really means is, I don't understand this yet. And often when we don't understand something, it scares us a little. So we judge it in the beginning. We just judge it. And I think the first step to taking back control and to actually sitting in the driver's seat of your life is simply noticing these default settings that you have, becoming aware that they exist, and recognizing where they may be operating. Because you can't change what you don't acknowledge, and you can't truly choose your path if you don't realize that many of your choices have been pre selected for you. So, I'm asking you right now to start paying attention when you have a strong reaction to something, especially when that reaction is judgment or discomfort. Ask yourself, is this actually me thinking this, or is this just my programming? Where does this come from? And honestly, I will put money on the fact that your assembly line that built you probably did a pretty good job. But now it's time for you to decide which factory settings you want to keep and which ones you might want to reprogram. talk about now the crisis of individuality. So, once you start noticing these default settings, right? It can really, well, if you're like me, it can throw you for a loop. Maybe you could give two craps. I was really thrown for a loop. And I'm not going to lie, it started to feel like, again, I wasn't forming my own thoughts at all. Like I was just this soldier in a mental army marching to orders that I never consciously signed up for, just part of this unit. And all of us blended in and were just completely identical. Like that's how I was feeling. And again, it made me ask this very uncomfortable question of, well, who am I really? And I did lose hope for like a little while about this idea of like individuality. And I really kept thinking to myself, well, I guess I was just born like this, and this is just how I see the world. And to really change it, it would be difficult. I really wasn't sure how much I could change the way I thought. I mean, I am naturally curious and open minded. I think I always have been, but maybe it was just too difficult to really see things that differently because I was already like, again, pre wired. So, again, maybe they already poured the concrete and that was my foundation. So, again, I was panicking. I was feeling quite basic. I was a bit terrified of this. And it's funny because this was probably like a good 6 months of my life being like, man, I'm just so basic. Like, of course I think this way. Like, again, this is the type of stuff that upsets me at least. And it's funny because whenever something is troubling you, or I feel like whenever you throw a question out into the void, or when you're stuck on a topic and you don't know how to move forward, somehow this question is answered. And for me, this question was answered in a podcast I was listening to. And I really couldn't believe it. I literally, as soon as I heard that he was going to this, I remember I stopped working, I stopped doing everything, and I was like, I'm just going to take notes. Like, this guy is about to give me the answer I've been searching for at least a few months. And what he said really helps me, and I hope it can help you. So the podcast host was asking, what is actually me? Because so much of who I am, my biology, my culture, my race, the society I was born into shapes how I experience the world. It's a huge part of me. But where does me begin? And the guy said that even the words we use come from generations and generations before us. They're shaped and refined by people long before we were here. Even our gut bacteria, it's us, but it's not actually us. Excuse me, my gut bacteria. Anyways, so this is what he said. He said, we are constantly shaped by biology, history, society, culture. So then what's left of us? At first, it was like an overwhelming question. You could kind of feel that in the podcast. Like maybe I and all of us are just this collection of influences with absolutely nothing original inside. But this is where the host he had on gave me an answer that really just helps me a lot. And he said, and of course I'm paraphrasing in my own words, yes, there is something that is you. Part of life's journey is realizing that although a lot has been placed inside of you by the world you were born into, you have the power to choose. You get to decide which parts do I want to keep and which parts truly reflect my values and my considered choices. This is where life gets interesting, he said. He continues to say, people are individuals when they say things like this. Where I come from, the normal thing is X, but the way I think about it is Y. That's the beginning of editing. That's the beginning of what he called self authorship. The more someone matures, the more their beliefs, actions, and values come from their own careful work, their own sifting, their own questioning, and their own building, not just the default settings that they were born into. And no, we may not be able to do this perfectly in every area of life because we also have busy lives and we also all have like busy schedules, but he said that we can do it in the areas that really matters the most to us. So let's just say, for instance, you really care about politics, but you don't really care that much about uh, F1 formula driving, right? Like, I feel like I didn't even say that right, but you get what I'm saying. Like, some people just care about more topics than others. So he said that you should do it in the topics that you care most about, and that this sifting, this questioning, this building, this is what makes you an individual. And I really internalized that and listened to that podcast, and I loved it because actually what he said, I didn't think about it, but I had actually already been doing that very intuitively, especially the first year after Spain and having all these, really intense conversations with people that had very different opinions of me. Instead of being like, no, they're wrong and I'm right, I would be like, you know what? I'm going to sit with that idea. So, again, I've been doing this for a while and it's something that I've really liked because I do feel myself becoming more of my own individual. And this is what I want for you. And this is also something that I say in this podcast all the time. Don't sit here and take what I say at face value because you are your own person and you need to be dissecting everything for yourself. You have a brain. Think for yourself. Again, I want you to discover what makes you truly happy. Not just be the model that came off the assembly line, but the unique vehicle you've chosen to be. Because maybe you were factored as a BMW in Germany or as a Honda in Japan or whatever country, right? Like you need to question where you are from. And you might realize that, hey, Ford actually has some really cool features, but Range Rover has sick aesthetic. And holy crap, the Fiat 500, it's so freaking cute and you can get the best gelato there. I hope you get my car analogies and like where these cars are from. But yeah, I think you're going to realize that maybe you really like some things about where you're from, but maybe there's just other things you don't care for. So again, even though your car might have been manufactured in one place, you get to decide where and how you drive it. Now let's shuffle into the beauty of different settings. When you start noticing your personal default settings, I think there's a moment where you realize, wait, if my settings are based on where I was built, then everyone else's settings are too. And suddenly, I think, the world makes a lot more sense. I will say, when you really understand where someone's from and their religion and their ethnicity, I think it does make you a lot more understanding of like, it's so okay for someone to be so different than you. And you really can understand a lot about someone when you know those things. But I want to be very clear about something. This journey of questioning your factory settings isn't about harsh judgment or deciding that everything about your background is wrong. I actually think it's kind of the opposite because at least what I've come to find while doing this is that we are all somewhat biased and prejudiced, and we're probably never going to be able to fully get rid of that because it's just so hard and so innate, and we can't fully help it. I mean, this is literally why there's such a rigorous process for selecting juries in court because they don't want bias. They don't want subjectivity, but it's so hard to avoid because we are emotional creatures at the end of the day. We'd like to think that we're more rational and fair, and I do think some people are just better at being objective in general, but at our core, we all create stories and narratives in our heads that we have garnered from our experiences because we all do see the world through such a unique lens shaped by our unique experiences. And you know what? That's actually a really good thing because that's what makes the world so rich and diverse. And I don't want to treat this like it's something negative. I think it's really cool, but I think sometimes when people don't see eye to eye, they just think the other person is wrong and they're really missing out on the fuller picture because it's what actually makes the person so unique to be so different than you. Because we all see the world a little differently because we've all walked different paths and lived through different experiences. So when we share our ideas and perspective, we can bounce thoughts off of each other. We can expand our view. And hopefully, by sharing, we can understand life a little bit more deeply. One thing I've really learned from moving abroad is that no matter where you come from, I already said this, people do tend to think that their way is the better way and the superior way. And when we meet people who don't think like us, the first thing we do is label them as perhaps weird. And I think instead of weird, we should just be labeling them as different because weird can have an ugly connotation. Different doesn't have to have a negative connotation. I even think about like extremely crazy examples sometimes. Listen to this. Like, what if we had three noses or three eyes? You're probably thinking, what? But seriously, what if we had three noses or three eyes? It sounds bizarre because we're just used to having two. But if we had always had three, then we would think two is weird. We only think two is weird because two is what we know. If three is all we knew, three would have been normal. You get what I'm saying? And again, this applies to everything that seems strange to us or unfamiliar. We think it's weird because it's just not what we have known. And I know that, at least for me, I'm trying to practice this mindset where I catch myself thinking that's weird. And again, I replace it with no, that's different from what I've known, from what I've heard of, from what I've thought. And I think that this small change creates space for a curiosity of things that are different than you versus being judgmental and just honestly being close minded. Because when you do that, again, I think we do that because we don't understand it. So we label it quickly and then we don't think about it again. But I also think we're really deeply closing ourselves off from having a more richer life. So, when you approach different settings with curiosity, I think something magical can happen. Instead of feeling threatened, right, by different ways of thinking, you start to see them as opportunities to expand your own understanding. And I know that this has fully been my experience being over in Spain and not only talking to Spanish people, but truly talking to like so many people from Europe, so many people from South America. You get to hear so many different perspectives. And I think you can even akin it to test driving different cars. You don't have to buy every car you test drive, but you might discover features that you never knew existed and features that you might want to add on to your car. Like maybe those leather seats are worth it. Maybe you never thought about it, right? Like this is part of my core pillar that I talked about in the very beginning of this podcast of truth seeking. And going back to a lot of what I said in that podcast, I think with all this, be a truth seeker. And maybe there's truth in what these other people think, and you can incorporate it into what you believe. Because while I do believe we should honor our experiences and our cultures and our religions and everything that shaped us, I really do believe we should seek the truth and that should actually be our first priority. We should aim to correct our biases and we should stay open minded because the more you explore different settings, different peoples, different ideas, the more you can consciously choose which ones serve you and again, which ones don't. The more you can truly become the driver, not just the vehicle. So, next time you encounter someone whose factory settings are completely different from yours, start getting curious. Ask them questions. Don't just start to get offended because they may think differently than you. We get so offended and emotionally reactive way too easily. And if you do get offended, don't react in that moment. Go home and think, why did what this person say trigger me? Think on that, right? Try to understand why they see the world they do and not to judge, but and not to necessarily change your mind. Like you don't always have to change your mind, but expand upon it. Like take an idea into consideration. Like there's so many people that I've talked to that you can tell all they care about is being right. And you're missing out so much if that's your mentality in life, let me tell you. Because ultimately, this is how we grow by exposing ourselves to people, to settings different from our own, and then deciding with intention which ones we want to incorporate into our lives. And if there is one thing I have learned along the way, is that each culture, country, person really has something to offer, something to find, something that's so uniquely beautiful to them. After all, there's a reason that I'm still in Spain and I love it so much. Like, there are things I adore about it. I don't hate it, right? I'm not running back to the US. And I think that being there has reprogrammed me in the best possible way. Now, I want to talk about societal rules that we never questioned. And this is something that actually really fascinates me because I think these societal rules are invisible like strings that we all just accept. And they're so deeply embedded in us that, again, we don't realize that these are optional things to believe. Going back to what Penn Badly said, I can't say his name on the podcast. He was actually specifically referencing relationships and hookup culture when he said that. And he explained that when he met his now wife, they both realized that they had to unpack and figure out which ideas about relationships and how they should work were truly theirs and which were just ideas and ways of thinking that they had inherited from their environment. So Again, I found that really incredibly introspective because here was a lonely boy onto something. XOXO Gossip Girl. If you know, you know. Okay, I'll stop with the Gossip Girl references. Um, but yeah, I really liked it because there are so many beliefs floating around us all the time. And I don't know about you, but I know I often wonder, where did these ideas even start? Like, who said that? When did this become this societal rule that we had to follow? Like, take the classic narrative example. This is a very American one. Go to school, study hard, meet the love of your life in your late 20s, get married, have kids, right? This is a very Western idea, but why? Like, why this specific timeline? Like, who decided that it has to go this way exactly? Who set this up? And again, it feels like so many of us, including myself, we are putting all these rules on ourselves and we feel we're expected to follow them. But the thing is, if you don't stop and ask yourself, what are these rules and do I even want to subscribe to them? You end up living a life that maybe isn't really yours. And I feel like this happens a lot. And another idea that fits perfectly here is something I once read in a book about marriage. The author is a divorce lawyer who has handled countless divorces, and he posed this one simple but very powerful question, which was, what is the problem to which marriage is so sorry. What is the problem to which marriage is a solution? And do I have that problem? Will marriage actually solve it? So I'll say it one more time. What is the problem to which marriage is a solution? And do I have that problem? And will marriage actually solve it? Okay, the church bells are ringing, so I'm going to stop. So he was making the point that people need to actually stop and question why they want to get married. Culturally, marriage is just seen as a normal, automatic goal, right? But if someone asks you, why do you want to get married? I think, or no, if someone asked you, why do you want to get married and pose the question that he just posed, most people would feel insulted. Like, it's obvious. What do you mean? Why would I want to get married? But really, when you think about it, this is a very smart question to be asking yourself because, yeah, you should know why the frick you want to tie yourself legally and emotionally to another person for the rest of your life. And he made that point very clearly. And listen, I heard it loud and clear. I really think that a lot of people, if they really sat down and thought about why they wanted it and what the problem was, we'd have a lot less divorce. But hey, that's just my theory here. Anyways, so around the same time, I also read a Substack article that perfectly aligned with this whole idea. And the author titled her piece very boldly, I Don't Dream of Marriage or Motherhood. Fair enough. And honestly, I think she articulated her thoughts really well. And you could tell she had really thought it through because in one line, this is the line that stuck with me the most. She said, I have simply learned how to separate my core desires from the desires that were given to me. For her, marriage and children were ideas she had inherited from her environment. But through her own reflection, she realized that they weren't actually her own dreams. She explained that these core wants often get morphed into cultural expectations that we blindly accept. And when we don't interrogate them, we end up choosing what we were told to want and not what we truly want. And listen, this isn't just about marriage and having children. It applies to everything. The career path you're on, the city you live in, the way you spend your free time, the goals you're pursuing, the definition of success that you're chasing. All of these have societal defaults. And if you never question them, I really think you're just following this pre-programmed route without even realizing that there's so many other roads available to you. Not even that, roads that you can create and roads that may just look better for you and your individual needs. So I think about it like this. Imagine you're driving with the GPS on and you never look out the window. You just never look out the dang window. You just follow the directions, turn by turn, until you reach the destination someone else programmed for you. Like you'd never question the GPS, never. But what if the most beautiful scenery, the most meaningful experiences were on a whole different route altogether? And Come on, like who doesn't question the GPS now and again? Do you know how many times Google Maps tells me I'm in Romania when I'm actually in Spain and it's acting all funny and being ridiculous? Like, dear God, please, for the love of God, never fully trust the GPS. It could be lying to you. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have fully had it take me to the wrong route because I just didn't even question it. And then I was super upset when I got there because this was like a 3 hour drive. Please question these societal norms, question what you want. And I'm not saying that these societal norms are actually bad. Like, I think some of them are good and they work for some people. But again, make sure that they are a conscious choice for you, not something default that you're just accepting without questioning. So, I challenge you to look at the roadmap you're following and ask, who programmed this GPS? And is this really where I want to go? Or am I just following this route because it's been pre installed for me? All right, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about recognizing our default settings, questioning who we really are, approaching different perspectives, and then identifying these societal rules that many of us probably have never questioned. But now comes the most important part. And, I always like to make things practical here, which is how do we actually take this driver's seat? How do we become our own individual? How do we move from awareness to action? How do we start making choices that are ours? So, I want to share some practical steps that I have personally been taking between my inherited beliefs and my authentic desires. This isn't a perfect science. This is just me. It's more of an ongoing practice. But again, these are approaches that have helped me feel like I'm driving my own car. So, first, I want you to question the sources of your desires. Whenever you find yourself wanting something, whether it's a career goal, a relationship milestone, or even something as simple as a big purchase, pause and ask yourself, why do I want this? Why do I want this? And then, more importantly, where did this desire come from? Did it come from social media, from your parents' expectations, from comparing yourself to friends, from cultural messaging about what success looks like? Or does it come from a genuine alignment with your values and what brings you joy? Actually, I just read a Substack that I came across today, and I want to share something that she said about why. She said, like asking yourself in life, why? But isn't asking why exhausting? Yes. And that's precisely why it matters more. How can be memorized? Why must be earned? It is the spiritual cousin of suffering, forged in the crucible of curiosity, failure, longing, absurdity, and sometimes even despair. The philosophers bled ink over it. Children ask it endlessly. Adults bury it beneath mortgages and Wi Fi password. Why insists we not just perform life, but understand it. It does not care if the choreography is flawless. It wants to know what dance we think we are doing in the first place. And when the music stops, only those who asked why will still be standing, however shaken, with a candle lit in the dark. So again, why forces us to not just perform, but understand why we are doing all the things that we are doing. So again, why would you want to get married? Why do you want to have this certain job? Why do you want to live in this certain city? Why do you care so much about buying clothing? Think about, where did this come from? Was it cultural messaging? Was it your parents? Was it societal expectation? And align for yourself, does this actually come from me, from my values, and what brings me joy? Because sometimes you'll discover that, again, what you thought was your own desire was really just planted there by all these external influences. And listen, I do want to say that's okay, right? Like, this is a very deep, intricate topic, like, that takes a lot of thinking. Like, I understand this is a lot. I think just the important thing is that now you get to decide whether to keep this desire or let it go. But the reason that I'm honing down on the importance of this is because I don't want you living a life that you didn't even want. You're just living because you're pre-programmed. Like, I want you living a life that you like. Second, test your values against real life choices. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's one thing to say you value something. It's another thing to actually make choices and take actionable steps that reflect that value. For example, let's say you say that you value freedom and autonomy, but you keep choosing relationships or jobs that restrict your independence. listen, there's a misalignment there. Maybe freedom isn't actually as important to you as you thought, or maybe you're making choices based on default settings rather than your true settings. Again, when you notice these misalignments, you have now valuable information. You can either adjust your stated values to match your actual choices, or you can change your choices to better align with your values. Either way, you're moving toward greater authenticity. Okay, on to the third practice. Practice what the writer that I quoted from Substack, the one that said she realized she separated her core values from the ones given to her, was she talked about following and having a soft curiosity. And I really like this approach because it's not about harshly judging or resenting everything around you or where you're from, right? Your family, your culture, your background. I mean, some people do take that route, and I do find it to actually be very sad because, again, I always think there's going to be something good from where you're from. But yeah, instead of being super harsh about it, just have a soft curiosity about gently questioning with genuine interest rather than judgment. So it's kind of like holding your beliefs in an open palm rather than a clenched fist. You're willing to examine them and turn them over and see them from different angles. And I think that when you take this approach, it helps you honor where you come from while still choosing where you want to go and what you might want to change. And you can appreciate the car you were given while still customizing it in a way that's better that suits you. Fourth, identify which parts of your background you want to keep. Again, not everything in your default settings needs to be changed. There are probably many aspects of your cultural, family, or educational background that really resonate with you and you like, and they're a part of who you are. And, I've realized that there are so many things from my background and upbringing and environment that I really do like and I'm keeping. And they aren't just default settings now, they're values and perspectives that I've examined and chosen to embrace because they aligned with who I am currently. Now, may they not align with who I am in 5 years? Perhaps. Like, we're always evolving, right? And finally, choose consciously what to leave behind. Just as important it is as knowing what to keep is deciding what no longer serves you. What beliefs, habits, or expectations have you inherited that don't align with your authentic self? This, again, doesn't mean rejecting your entire background. It means making intentional edits towards your self authorship, keeping what works and revising what doesn't. And this goes back to what Lonely Boy said and his words that really for me resonated so deeply, which is you get to decide what you want to keep and what you want to let go. So, this entire process does connect directly again to all my core pillars: intentional living, personal responsibility. Intentional living means making conscious choices that are yours rather than always operating on autopilot. Personal responsibility means recognizing that while, yes, you didn't choose your default settings, now you're an adult, and adults have the power to reprogram these things. All in all, the really beautiful thing about this journey is that it is ongoing, right? Like, you don't have to figure out everything at once. And like the guy said, you probably are going to do this mostly in the areas that you care about the most, maybe not in every single aspect of life, because we also all do live busy lives, right? Again, start with one area. Maybe you want to fix your relationship patterns, your career goals, your definition of success, how you approach reacting to things. Again, just examine your default settings in whatever area you choose, decide what you want to keep, what you want to modify, and what you want to release entirely. And then move on to the other area. Little by little, choice by choice, you'll find yourself truly more being the driver of your life and not just following that GPS without checking it. And again, then you move on to another area. Because remember, the goal isn't that you have to completely reinvent yourself in a day or reject everything about your origins. It's just to become more intentional about which parts of your manufacturing you embrace and which parts you choose to reprogram. Because, like I said in the very beginning, I just want you to make sure you're living a life that you really, really like and you're doing things that you want to do, not what other people think you should be doing. Well, my friends, this brings us to the end of the podcast. We've covered a lot today, from recognizing our factory settings to questioning who we really are, from appreciating different perspectives, identifying societal rules we've blindly followed, and taking practical steps to grab that steering wheel. Now, I want to talk about why I think this matters, that you need to think beyond your manufactured settings, right? Like, why do you even need to do this? Like, well, no, Maria, everything is perfect where I'm from. I don't need to question anything. Mm. This is why I would tell you that this is an important thing to be doing in your life. One, there is so much more you don't know than what you do know. There is so much more you don't know than what you do know. And you know how you'll figure this out very quickly? Go visit a country where you don't speak the language. Let me tell you, you'll be humbled real quick and you realize that you know nothing about the language, the environment, the people, the culture. You are a lost little lamb. So don't get super cocky when you've always been in the country where you're from. Let me tell you. Because people think that they know everything. And this always has genuinely been something that I really can't understand because you know so little. Like, you know so little. So yeah, I think that's one reason. Also, I think when you never question things in life, you're probably living someone else's versions of success rather than pursuing what truly fulfills you. Um, I think thinking your way of thinking is the best or whatever means that you most likely are perpetuating harmful biases and judgments that you've inherited without examination. I think that you could be missing out on experiences and connections due to artificial limitations because you think that since you're from X, you're probably better than the person from Y. This happens a lot. I think that it's important because you could be making major life decisions just based on cultural timelines rather than personal readiness. I think you could be staying trapped in patterns that no longer serve you because you never question them. I think that hearing other people's perspectives and doing this can create more empathy for other people and connection because when we recognize our own programming, I think we develop compassion for others operating on different settings and we can bridge our differences between these cultural generations and perspective by being open minded. I think that if we don't do this, it prevents us from passing down limiting beliefs to the next generation. It can break the cycle of unconscious programming that allows us to be more intentional about what we teach others. You know, I didn't really get into this, but this isn't just a cultural thing, too. Like, think about your family. Think about terrible patterns that you saw within your parents that you don't want to be like, that you don't serve you, and how if you don't question that, you're going to pass that down to possibly like your kid. Like, I didn't touch on that, but I'm not just talking your country, like, I'm talking everything that makes you you. I think that if you do this, it unlocks creativity and innovation within you because many breakthroughs come from questioning assumptions that other people take for granted. I think doing this helps you build resilience because you're understanding that many of your reactions are programmed rather than that doing this can build resilience and it can help you feel more connected to what you actually believe. I think this allows for authentic growth and true personal development to me can only happen when you know which parts of yourself were truly yours versus them just being installed. I think it can help resolve internal conflicts within you because often our deepest struggles come from contradictions between our authentic desires and our pre-programming. I think it creates space for joy to do this because many of us have inherited settings that make it difficult to prioritize pleasure, rest, and celebration without guilt. I think it gives us authority over our own stories rather than living a narrative written by our culture, our family, or our society. It makes us a colorful unicorn. Um, because how fun is it to meet someone that you had perhaps all these preconceptions about meeting them because of how they look, where they're from, their job, their world, but then you start talking to them and you're like, this person is a total enigma. None of them make sense. They are not at all what you anticipated them to be. Again, we need to stop putting people in boxes. We need to stop putting people in categories and we need to take more time to try to just understand people. People are like onions with so many layers. Be excited to talk to people. Be curious. Like, open your mind. Okay, as you can tell, I think that this is important. So let's bring it all back to our car metaphor. Your mind, your beliefs, your way of seeing the world, it's like a vehicle that was manufactured in a specific factory. If you were built in America, like me, you came with American settings. If you were built somewhere else, you came with those different settings. And for a long time, many of us are just driving our cars exactly as they came out on the assembly line. We've never popped the hood. We've never looked at the owner's manual. We never questioned if the factory settings were actually optimal for our own unique journey. But here is the truth. And the truth I want to leave you with today is that you get to decide what factory settings you're going to keep in your car and which ones you want to adjust and which ones you want to reset. And I want to say that this actually takes a lot of courage to examine your default settings. It's much easier to just be on autopilot, keep everybody happy around you, do what society expects from you. You're the good boy, you're the good girl. But then you're just following a route that's pre-programmed for you, and there's a good chance you might be miserable. So, the most meaningful life, the most authentic life comes from making conscious choices about who you want to be. Conscious choices, intentional choices. It comes from recognizing that while life contains inevitable suffering, you will always remain in the driver's seat of your journey. So, I want to challenge you with these questions for reflections. What are your default settings? Are they serving you or limiting you? Where might you need to update them? What parts of your programming do you want to keep and what parts are you ready to let go of? Because remember that becoming this individual that I talked about, this is a lifelong thing. Your opinions are going to change. You're going to be open to new ideas. You're going to meet new people, hopefully. It's not about completely erasing your origins or, again, rejecting where you're coming from and hating it. It really is about honoring yourself as an individual and choosing all these things with consciousness and intentionality. And again, this journey of questioning, being curious, growing, it never ends. And that's what makes it so cool because each day brings a new opportunity to take the wheel, to choose your path, to drive with intention rather than habit. Life is tough, there's no denying it. The roads are going to have potholes, unexpected detours, and sometimes even crashes. But you're tougher. I always say it, you are tougher. And you have the power to navigate these challenges with courage, to create meaning through intention, and to choose the harder but braver path ahead. This journey is ongoing, and of course, the choice is always yours to drive. You just simply have to have the courage to get in your car and start the engine and keep going day after day. So the next time you catch yourself operating on default settings, just pause, take a breath. Remember that your car didn't just roll off the assembly line, that you're the driver and you can change the way you see things. Guys, thank you so much for being here in today's episode. I really hope it could be helpful. I really hope it encourages you and gets you excited to be your own individual because I know that this process of self-authorship and doing my own editing has been really cool and it makes me uniquely Maria. And I hope that by following this, it will make you uniquely you. Thanks for being here and I will catch you in next week's episode.